So I named this video, if you're worried about prices and jobs, watch this. And hopefully you came over because you saw that title and you're like, okay, that's what I want to do, because I'm going to talk about prices and jobs in this video. I went through this structure with my kids, and this is what I'm telling my kids, they're adults. But this is what I'm telling my adult daughters to do to prepare for things right now, and this is what I'm personally doing, and we are seeing success when we apply these principles. So, first of all, but what you need to do if you are worried about the price increase that you're seeing and the job market, if you're applying for things and all these places are begging for people and you're just not getting a job, these are things to consider. Number one, don't pretend that it is not coming. There is real inflation. We have reached the definition of a recession, whether our government wants to call it that or not. We are here. Spend less time goofing and more time preparing. Don't get bored online. When you get bored online, you'll spend money and you'll waste time. Each week, buy 1 or 2 extra days of food, non-perishable food items. So like I typically will say, an extra can of chicken, an extra can of tuna, an extra can of green beans, an extra box of like pasta. This is good advice because right now I've been seeing at our local grocery store, I just went grocery shopping last week for the month. I go once a month and then I buy perishables throughout the month because I have found I spend less when I do it that way. And I go with a list and I go with my coupons and I watch the sales and I build my list from that. If you have questions about that, go to my channel and you can see how I taught my teenagers to do grocery shopping when they were in high school. But I have been seeing things like turkey stovetop on sale for half off. I don't know if it's last year's. I don't know if it's this year's, if they have more than they think they'll need. I honestly don't care. What I'm finding is stovetop is half price. Stovetop is something I eat, and it's cheaper than it was a few months ago. So I typically buy like 4 of them when I find that, figuring if I eat one a month. Because like I said, I was doing the big monthly grocery shopping. Tuna fish. When it's on sale, I'll buy 3 or 4 of those because it's something that I eat. That kind of thing. It's simple. It's not contributing to skyrocketing prices. What I'm buying is the things that are currently on sale that I typically use because that means there's a surplus of these items right now. I'm saving money. I'm stocking up for what I need in the future. I'm not causing a run on toilet paper. Number 3, chip away at your debt. There is a really great debt calculator at calculator.net that you can use to figure out how to pay off your credit cards. Also, I'm going to put a link in the description below to the mortgage payoff calculator, which also can be used if you're wanting to buy a house and get a mortgage but pay it off quickly. You can use this same system. There's a really great video. I think the video is about an hour long if you watch the whole thing, but you can pause it and come back to it later. But the video that teaches you how to use the calculator itself, I think, is actually shorter. It's like 20 minutes. But it's really cool if you're trying to get your mortgage paid off quickly. And that's what I'm personally using to pay off our mortgage. Like, it'll be gone in about 2 years or less. Number 3, improve your credit score. You can do that by making on-time payments, by decreasing your debt-to-income ratio, by reducing how much you're using your credit cards. I personally pay off my credit cards every month unless I have something where I've transferred a balance and it's got a 0 balance on it, a 0 interest rate for a period of time, and then I'll let that balance carry because it's free money. And I have it in my savings account to pay it off at the end of that time period. And the next thing is build your reserves. I've talked in other videos about things as simple as just throwing your extra change in a can and cashing it in twice a year. Build your reserves of food, like I just described, buying a little bit extra. Building your reserves of cash by doing little odd jobs or by cutting one budget area. Maybe if you go out twice a month, typically to a restaurant, you go out once a month. Or cutting out a more expensive thing one time a week. Saving $5 or $10 here and there. It adds up. If you save $5 a month, that's $60 a year. You can pay a bill with $60. Some of you lucky people in the city can probably pay your electric or gas bill with $60. I can't, but I live in a rural area. All right. The next thing ties into the videos that I just did earlier this month, where I talked about thinking through scenarios, like what you would do in a problem situation. I hope you've been sitting down and thinking through, like basically solving a problem a day. What would I do if this thing happened? So you kind of have mentally walked yourself through the what ifs. So consider a backup plan for everything. My kids will tell you, I quote Ronald Reagan often, where he said, trust but verify. We just had this happen with one of my daughters. We were sitting down and I was talking her through budgeting and how to pay certain things off. And so I said, okay, how much do you pay each month? I can't remember if it was electric or gas. It was one of her utilities. And she said, well, I don't know yet, but I just had it hooked up because she just moved into an apartment. And so she pulled up the bill and it said, here's what the bill is. Here's the payment, which was the full bill. But then the balance due said the full amount. So it said, I don't remember what it was. Let's say it was $50. That's not what it was, but let's just say. So it was like $50, payment of $50, total due $50. And we're like, is it a new bill? So she looked, she's like, no. I was like, you know what? Check on that when you get back to your apartment, because she had just paid it like 2 or 3 days prior. Well, it turns out something didn't go through right. And had she not checked on it, she would have had late fees and this and that and the other. Always, when you're setting up a new payment plan or setting up something to auto pay from a new account, the same daughter had the same thing happen a year ago when she set up her first auto pay on a credit card. So we still to this day don't know what happened, but she was charged late fees and her card was put on hold and all this stuff happened and she had paid the card. So trust but verify. Whenever you're doing something, double check it actually worked, and then check again a few days later, and then check again a week later. But by the same scenario, what would you do if you found out that your utility bill didn't get paid and now you've got a late fee and a return check fee or whatever kind of fee? Do you have the money to cover that? What would you do if you didn't have a car? What would you do if you went out tomorrow morning and your car wouldn't start? What's your backup plan? What would happen if you went to work this week and you found out you had no job? That happened to my husband 17 years ago. He walked into work one day, and he was a paramedic, and for like he was the person that came when you called 911. And he went to we put his paycheck in the bank. And I got a call a few days later, and he was the only one working. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. We had little kids that were under school age. And the paycheck bounced. Well, then for the next 3 months, the paychecks weren't good most of the time. And so you'd have to wait. So you weren't even sure on your payday if you were going to get paid. And then after all this, after 3 months, he went into work and found out the company was closing. Like, gone. It no longer existed that day. So what would you do? You don't get unemployment. You don't get, any of these things. You just don't have a job. Things did work out, and I won't go into all that because that's not the purpose of this scenario, but what would you do in that situation? I've told you guys before, when my husband was diagnosed with cancer, he was supposed to go to work that day. We were seeing a specialist. We were scheduling a biopsy. And he said, well, how long is this going to take? Because I've got to be at work tonight at 7. And the doctor goes, no, you don't understand. If your bone is weakened, if you step on it wrong, it will break and the cancer will spread throughout your body. You do not work again until this cancer is gone. We had no kind of PTO with that company. We had no kind of, I think what we ended up finding out, the disability started after 90 days without any form of a paycheck, and it paid half of your base pay. Well, if you know paramedics, they typically work on what's called a 24-48 rotating schedule. So he would be paid 48 hours 1 week, 48 hours 1 week, 72 hours 1 week. Well, the way the disability worked is it was based on 40 hours. So he would essentially get paid 20 hours a week, which, as you can see with the math and overtime and time and a half and those kind of things, was like more like a third of what he made. And that didn't start until 90 days without any form of pay. Um, so that was not a good situation to find out on December the 5th. What if you had no fuel? What would you do with your car? Do you have Auto Club? Will Auto Club come? We have Auto Club for our daughters. We had a scenario just a year ago, it was a year ago this month actually, where my daughter's brakes, like the brake line snapped and she managed to get her car stopped. And the car was supposed to be towed, and thankfully it was only a couple miles from her apartment and she lives close. And so I picked her up and I took her to her apartment, because what we found out is after hours, nobody was going to come and pick up the tow. The tow truck driver actually was never notified because the information was sent to their dispatch, which was not manned after 5 o'clock. So I was sitting in a parking lot until 2 a.m. waiting for these people to come, only to find out nobody was coming. And when somebody finally came, they sent somebody to give me a jump, not a tow. So it's maddening. It's horrible. But what would you do in that situation? What is your backup plan? At the very least, make sure you have a working cell phone to try to get somebody to come pick you up and take you to safety. Her cell phone was almost dead. And I said, never, ever, ever be in that situation. What if you had no extra income? What would you do? Try to think creatively and imagine if you had no choice. So people will often say, well, I can't do that because of X. What if you had no choice? So like if you had to get to work and you had no cars that ran, I have literally been in that situation. My husband was diagnosed with cancer within 2 weeks. This was before we knew they found the tumor, but he had not been diagnosed yet. So they found the tumor on November 10th. On November 11th, the engine in his car blew. And so I had to drive him into work and bring the babies back home and, then pick him up the next morning because he was on a 24. And so he was going through treatment. We only had one vehicle because the other one, the engine died. It was over 200,000 miles. We sold it for a few $100s for scrap. And we're like, okay, well, we'll just work with one vehicle. You're going through chemo anyway. There's no place to go. Who cares? In the spring, the engine in my car went. So we had 0 vehicles. We were out in the country. How are we going to work? So what would you do in that situation? How would you make it work? You have no income, and you haven't had income for 5 months. Remember, he was on unpaid medical leave. So we couldn't finance a car. What would you do? The only way to get out of that is to get to work. But you can't get to work because you don't have a car. And we were denied any form of welfare, government benefits, any of that stuff. What would you do? Don't say it can't happen. I lived it. So what would you do? I'm telling you to think through these scenarios because they can and do happen. And we can't just trust that the government will swoop in and fix it, because they won't. Now, do this for other scenarios. If you're worried about prices and jobs, think through these things and think about what you would do. Stop worrying, start to get empowered. Start to say, well, I would wish that I had done X. So like when my daughter's car broke down and her battery was almost dead in her cell phone, well, make sure your phone is always charged and that you have a charge bank with you that is fully charged at all times in case something like that ever happens. And how would you get to safety? What numbers do you have? Not just saved in your cell phone, but what numbers do you have that you could call, like a taxi service? Do you have a number to a taxi service in your glove compartment to call if you can't get an Uber, that you can tell someone to come and get you? Those are the kind of things. Well, this has been an extra long video. Thank you so much for staying on it. I'd love to hear some of your potential scenarios in the comments below, and let me know some of the things you'd like to discuss, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.